This is an open letter to Mr. Zelensky, or however you pronounce your name, the person who's the leader of Ukraine at the moment. Here's the thing, Mr. Zelensky. If I, in the future, if I am ever locked up in a room with a 900-pound gorilla, I try not to pick a fight with the gorilla. And if, on top of that, if the gorilla has some kind of a reasonable demand, such as telling me that I should stay neutral in the future, I certainly agree with the 900-pound gorilla. Because it doesn't make any sense for me to not accept any reasonable demand from the 900-pound gorilla in the room with me. Because what is the objective? The objective for me to stay alive and be as I am, the way I look today, the way I can think today, the way, the arrangement that my face has today, currently. If I fuck around with the gorilla, or if I don't accept the gorilla's reasonable demands, if he has any, then what's the use? And if I don't accept it, what's the use if let's say I get into a fight with the gorilla, and let's assume I do stay alive after the fight with the gorilla, and let's assume the gorilla is not successful in killing me. But what's the upside? When every bone in when what is left after the gorilla is done with me is no longer me. The face has been rearranged, the bones have been rearranged, the consciousness has been rearranged, the psychology has been rearranged, the mindset has been rearranged. Everything about me after a beatdown from a gorilla, the 900-pound gorilla, everything about me has changed. So what is it am I protecting by not going along with any reasonable demands that the gorilla has of me? Am I protecting me? After the gorillas, if I get into a fight with the gorilla, what remains of me is not going to be me anymore. So what am I protecting? Am I protecting my physical self, my spiritual self, my what am I protecting? My mental self? After the gorilla is done with me, if I get into a fight, what remains of me is not going to be me. So I'm not in actually not listening to the reason of the gorilla. If he has any reasonable demands, I'm not, if I say no to the reasonable demands of the gorilla, I'm not actually protecting me. I am actually, slaughtering myself. Here's the thing, Mr. Zelensky. When I say reasonable demands of the gorilla, there is an old saying that says, politics is the art of possible. Politics is the art of possible. That is to say, what it's trying to say is that if you're Iceland in the middle of Atlantic Ocean, you can be part of NATO and you can probably be part of European Union. But if you're Ukraine and you're a neighbor to Russia, it's not reasonable. If the Russians, if the Russians say that, okay, you don't have to be in a military cooperation with us, the Russians, like the NATO, but at least you should remain neutral. It makes us feel a little more at ease. I think that's a reasonable demand. That's a very reasonable demand by the Russians. But and it's not worth going to war with a 900-pound gorilla, because as I said, what's the point of it if what remains afterwards is not going to be really you? What remains after a fight with a 900-pound gorilla is not worth mentioning. It's not really going to be you. So I was thinking that as a leader of Ukraine, why was it that you didn't accept the reasonable demands that the Russia made for you to be neutral? Because it seemed like you wanted, it's like it didn't matter to you getting into a fight with a 900-pound gorilla. It's like you don't care. You're determined to, yes, we can match the gorilla. No, you can't, and you knew it. So there was either of two choices. That I realized that you did it either because of ignorance or malice. If as a leader you make a bad decision, it's either ignorance or malice. In terms of Iraqi war, George W. Bush was ignorant, but Dick Cheney probably did it out of malice. Because Dick Cheney probably had an idea of what shit show is going to be. George W. Bush didn't have any idea what shit show is going to be. So, malice, ignorance. Then I said, okay, if it's ignorance, yes, it might have been ignorance on your part that you're a comedian and don't realize that NATO is not going to get into a nuclear war with Russia over a non-member. You see, and the fact that in the middle of the war you ask the European Union to accept Ukraine as a member right in the middle of the fucking war, and in the middle of fucking war you're asking NATO to accept as member. They didn't accept you as a member before the war, when everything was supposedly dandy, because you were in a civil war. You're a corrupt. Ukraine is a corrupt country, and in the middle of civil war between the Ukrainian nationalists and the Russian ethnic minority and all other factions. It was a mess for the past decade, thanks to interference from Victoria Nuland. So it might have been ignorance. For a while I was thinking that you made the mistake of getting into a fight with the 900-pound gorilla out of ignorance. And again, but then I'm thinking that it might actually have been malice on your part, that you really don't care about Ukraine. Then I thought, why wouldn't he care about Ukraine? Then I realized that you may have a grudge against your motherland, going through your history and remembering all these neo-Nazis that you're supposedly allies with now, all the ethnic Ukrainians who actually helped the Nazis eliminate, kill, just extinguish a whole bunch of Jewish folks from Ukraine. They just helped the Nazis. So I have a feeling that you have a historical grudge against your own countrymen. You have a historical grudge against your own countrymen, the way they treated their own Jewish neighbors by handing them over to the Nazis, and in some cases even doing the Nazis' jobs for them, whatever the elimination of the Jewish folks. So when I realized that, and then once you follow that line of thinking, one realizes that you're also a dual citizen. Now, I think it's crazy for any country to pick a president who has dual citizenship, because no one knows where someone with dual citizenships loyalties lie. It's like no one knows where someone with dual citizenship loyalties lie. So I'm thinking that you're actually, if bad gets to worse, you're actually extracted and you go to Israel and you spend the rest of your days drawing a nice pension with honors in Israel, and you're in holidays for the rest of your life, early retirement. So it's not you or your family that really is going to have to be the proud owners of a pile of rubble after the fucking Russians get through with it, like Afghanistan. And then I realized that there's another incentive, malevolence incentive for you or the people who have backed you, and that is, if Ukraine is destroyed, turns into a pile of rubble as it's on its way to becoming, when dealing with this fucking 900-pound gorilla that is Russia, when Ukraine turns into a pile of rubble like Afghanistan, that's another incentive, a big incentive for the remaining Ukrainian Jewish folks, the 400 to 500,000 remaining Jewish folks in Ukraine, to move to Israel, because they would be, it's natural to leave a pile of rubble and go live somewhere that is not a pile of rubble. So I'm thinking, when you put all of this together, it does actually make sense that maybe you're not turning Ukraine into a pile of rubble out of ignorance, but you may be turning Ukraine into a pile of rubble out of malice, because you're reaching certain objectives that you might have, or your backers might have, that those objectives might not actually be to the benefit of the actual Ukrainians who are going to have to live in Ukraine after you leave, who don't have a dual citizenship, who cannot go to Israel, who cannot, maybe for a few years the neighboring European countries will house them, but after a few years they will kick them out to go back and live in Ukraine. So you put all these objectives together, one, you achieve, you get to grind your historical grudge against the Ukrainians, Ukrainian nationalists, ultra-nationalists, and Ukrainian Nazis by taking them to the slaughterhouse of Russia. You lead the Ukrainians, those who have been so mean to your people, the Jewish people of Ukraine. You get even with them by taking all of them to the Russian slaughterhouse and turning their homes into a pile of rubble by pretending to to stand up to Russia, while at the same time you're turning Ukraine into a pile of rubble. So you even out that grudge with the Ukrainians. You make Russia look bad, the Russian slaughterhouse, and there is the British and the French and the NATO like nothing better than to portray Russia as the barbarians, and in that way NATO gets to stay a viable option for other countries to join, because Russia. So you get even with the Ukrainians who have been mean to you. You draw Russia in a bad light by not accepting the reasonable offer of being neutral, and their attack, the Russian slaughterhouse, and then you incentivize the remaining Jewish folks in Ukraine to move to Israel by turning Ukraine into a pile of rubble. And then at the end you move out yourself to Israel, and Ukrainians are left with their pile of rubble, and Russians are left with shit on their face in the world community, and all because you pretended to be a friend of Ukraine. You didn't accept a reasonable offer from Russia to stay neutral, and I just feel bad for the Ukrainians. Yeah, I know they did bad things to your people in history, but I just feel bad for Ukraine and Ukrainians that are being dragged, are being duped into marching into the Russian slaughterhouse. And that NATO is not going to be involved. World War III is not going to happen, just like World War III did not happen over Afghanistan. And the British and the French and the NATO helped a lot, helped the Afghans a lot, but they helped them in order to prevent any kind of order from being implemented in Afghanistan. So the help that the West gave to Afghanistan was actually, they didn't help them with power plants and refineries and steel manufacturing. They just sold them a lot of weapons, which is actually exactly what the NATO is doing with Ukraine, just selling a lot of weapons. Here's the thing, Mr. Zelensky. I am very sorry for what Europeans have done to the Jewish folks. I am sorry for what the Ukrainians have done to the Jewish folks in the past. But at one point, somebody has to break this vicious circle. I mean, once the Ukrainians realize what you have done to them, they're never going to forgive. Just like you didn't forgive them for what they did to your kin with the help of the Nazis, they're not going to forget what you did to them in this turn. This vicious cycle of hatred, this vicious cycle of how I can get my neighbor's house, turn my neighbor's house into a pile of rubble, that's gotta stop sometime. That's gotta stop sometime, Mr. Zelensky. That's gotta stop sometime.